next guest is so sure that Donald Trump has the Republican nomination in the bag, he's already speculating who will be his running mate. Former political pollster and Edelman Berland CEO Mike Berland is with us now. Also joining the conversation, former RNC Communications Director Doug Heye. Good to see you, Doug.
Good to see you.
Thank you so much for joining us, Michael. Always great to see you. Okay, what do you got for us?
How are you? Well, Maria, we know the TV show The Apprentice.
Yeah.
And then we know Celebrity Apprentice. But on Wednesday night, we saw the first episode of The Political Apprentice. Donald Trump was holding court in the boardroom, and he was interviewing who's going to be my candidate. And I've used the same social media and analytic tools that I use in my corporate job to look at engagement. I don't look at the words that the candidates are saying. I look at what are the voters responding to. And we saw 5 spikes in it. And the number one spike was from Ted Cruz. He came on the scene. Look at how high he was above all the candidates. The first one is John Kasich when he went on his reaction to the economic proposals, and that was good. But when Ted Cruz took on CNBC and he started to talk about the stupid questions that they were asking, they went one by one. Look at that spike. Then Ben Carson said something.
So what is this spike? This is spike in what?
This spike is voter engagement. What caused the discussion on the internet? When did we see the blogs, the Twitter, the Facebook, the comments? And we can look at it in real time. And I'm watching the cadence of this, and this is what I do for my for my corporate clients. I use engagement to understand the strength of their brand. And so when I see Ted Cruz getting the attention, I know voters are now listening to him, seeing what he's going to do next. And Maria, he timed it perfectly. He told that wonderful story about his single mom, and he stood up for single moms at the end of the debate. He bookended it so nicely. I still think Marco Rubio is the candidate to watch, but Ted Cruz is on the scene.
Doug, what do you think?
I think Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio both had great nights following on debate night. And going into the vote just late last night really dovetails well into the message that they've been pushing, not just at the debate, but at the debate that you'll be moderating coming up. They've got, both of them, really strong lanes that they're filling right now. Voters are reacting to it. And it's interesting that we saw the two, I think the two front runners, Donald Trump and Ben Carson, both disappear at the debate from time to time. It's really unusual for front runners not to be at the forefront the entire time,
so
both from questions and jutting in.
So you don't agree then that Michael's basically saying, that Trump is the front runner and he was holding court to see who his VP would be? You don't agree with that? You think Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio
I think Trump remains a front runner. He obviously garners as much attention as he wants, but I think it's really early to be talking about who potential running mates would be. If we're 8 years ago, we might be talking about how Barack Obama would be Hillary Clinton's running mate. 4 years ago, it would be Herman Cain or Newt Gingrich's running mate.
Yeah, that's true.
And what happens in October and November isn't necessarily what happens in January, February, March.
We know that when you're the front runner, you don't want to engage in the debates. We know when you have that sort of lead, you don't get into the muck. You let everybody else do it. Trump was listening. Trump was really acting as the leader and running the room. As Doug said, he gets as much attention as he wants. He could have bombed into any of those questions.
I thought that helped his overall
Of course
image.
it did. This was his debate.
Because I felt watching it, I thought, okay, this is a different Trump. He knows how to self-edit. And he picked his spots, and maybe he wasn't the loudest voice in the room, but that in and of itself, it's knowing when to shut up as much as it is to
even when John Harwood called him a comic book or whatever he said, is this a comic, campaign? He basically said that's not a nice way to say it, but I'll answer the question anyway. I mean, it was a new Trump.
I thought the question, and to that point, when they posed the question to Mike Huckabee about does Trump have the moral background of a candidate that you would support? I thought that was what, and Trump's reaction to that was also measured.
Yeah, it was. It was very
forceful and measured.
Yeah, but I want to hear from Doug Heye here about Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, because we're all talking about Trump as the front runner here, and he has been, obviously. But you think Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio are basically making a path for themselves that they could emerge even stronger in the next debate, you think?
There's no question about it. Ted Cruz has put himself in a perfect position. If there's a slide from Ben Carson, if there's a slide from Donald Trump, he's right there to possibly get the voters who support those two. Marco Rubio, at the same time, when Jeb Bush went after him, Marco was strong, forceful, and on every question, on every answer, he looked presidential. And just real quick on Trump, Maria, I think one of the things that Trump did well was he benefited from questions that allow him to have the conversation that he wants. Donald Trump would much rather talk about, am I a comic book character or not, than talk about monetary policy, talk about housing starts, or all the economic things I thought we would hear a lot more of at the debate.
Right, right. So you're saying that he talked about those things even though they weren't topics that the moderators brought up?
Well, anytime you talk about Donald Trump at ad hominem attacks, anytime you talk to Trump about what he wants to talk about, the name calling, the less substantive, the less policy heavy stuff, Trump does well.
Yep.
Maria, Donald Trump has a place for Ben Carson in his administration. He told him at the debate, he said, Ben and I, there was a very important moment, he said, Ben and I got together. Ben is now under the tent. Ben will be part of the campaign. I think Huckabee said, I'm wearing a Trump tie. We're all going to be wearing Trump ties. Kasich, gone. Jeb Bush, gone. We're seeing some of the people who won't make it to the next round of The Apprentice. And we're seeing Marco Rubio is still there. Cruz is still there. I think Carly is still there, although she did herself no favors in this debate. Carson is part of it. This is now shaping up the way Donald Trump answers the questions and talks about the topics that he wants to do. You'll see him when you're running the debate. You'll see he's the master of the room now.
On the Veep question, wouldn't you think that if it's a Trump versus Hillary, that one of the things voters, the undecided voter is going to think, this Trump guy, he might be a great CEO, he might be a loony bird. Wouldn't he want to add on the number 2 of the ticket a really establishment candidate? Maybe it's a Kasich, maybe it's somebody else who everybody says, okay, finger near the button, I'm okay with that?
Well, this is a party that had Dick Cheney as their number 2. So, I don't know what the criteria is. Yes, he was establishment. So is Ted Cruz and so is Marco Rubio.
You think Cruz is establishment? I think
he's a little bit out, but for this party, he could be establishment.
Doug, what are the big issues do you think that Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio are running on right now?
For Ted Cruz, it's very similar to Trump. It is the negative reaction that so many people have throughout this country to Washington. Your clip earlier showed him talk about the Washington cartel. That's really strong language. If you're Marco Rubio, his life story is something that people react to. Right. Every question, every issue, he looks and sounds presidential, and he's forceful. He pushes back hard and pushes back on the media, pushes back on other candidates, and that's something the voters really react to.
And Rubio put the final nail in the coffin in Jeb Bush on Wednesday night. Done. Next.
Well, Jeb Bush tried to undercut him. It didn't work. It didn't work.
That was a good moment for Rubio, a bad moment for Bush, a great moment for Ted Cruz.
Bad strategy. That was bad strategy.
Michael, Doug, thank you very much. We'll see you soon, gentlemen. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
We'll see you. Thank you so much. Don't forget Fox